Hi everyone, welcome to Abbot Public Library's YouTube channel. I'm Lauren, I am the teen librarian here at Abbot Public Library, and today I kind of wanted to talk to you and recommend some books that are a little bit new to the collection, and some of them even fit in with the October spooky season. So we have quite a pick for today. So let's get started. So the first one I want to talk to you about is The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. It is set in this medieval type fantasy world where magic does exist, but it is slowly dying out and it's slowly fading from the current generation's memory. It focuses on two main characters, Wren and Ellis. Wren is from a family of gravediggers, and Ellis is not quite sure where he's from, and he is a map maker. So it kind of opens up with Wren being introduced to the concept of what a bone house is when she's a child, and she follows her father into the forest where magic does still exist. And bone houses in this book is technically zombies. The magic of the forest causes the dead to reanimate, and sometimes they're not harmful, I want to say. They tend to like have the memory of the persons whose soul was in the body when they were alive. But then there's some that are kind of dangerous. Like they're coming into the village and they're attacking the sheep and they're attacking the people. And so it goes back and forth between the two point of views of Ellis and Wren, and then there's some flashback sequences that go back into like the mythology of the world, whether that's Wren's childhood and her learning more about her background, or just like the folklore of the world and like how did bone houses come to be and how did they start. And so it goes through and you follow Wren and Ellis as they're trying to figure out and try to break basically the curse of the bone houses, and what's the origin of that, and what's Ellis's origin too, because we don't know in pretty much the majority of the book. So if you're interested in that, that's The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd-Jones. Now, this next book I'm talking about is another older one. It just came off the new collection shelf. It is a bit more spooky. It fits more in the spooky season. That's kind of why I included it. If you like horror movies, especially stuff like The Blair Witch Project, this might actually be a really good pick for you. It's called Rules for Vanishing by Kate Alice Marshall. And it's told in this really interesting way of like mixed media. So it goes back and forth between like the typical narrative style of a book and then like a movie script and then interview segments. And it focuses around the story of Sarah and a haunted road in her neighborhood. And it's set a year before this book takes place. Sarah's sister went out to find this haunted road and the ghost that supposedly lives on it, and disappeared and never came back. And so now it's a year later, the game has started again, and Sarah and her friends are going to the road and trying to find her sister. And it's very creepy, very haunting, and I actually couldn't finish it because I am a wimp and I hate horror books. But if you like horror books and if you like scary movies, especially this time of year, try Rules for Vanishing. So this next one I'm going to talk about is set last year. It came out last year as well. Came out in 2019. The sequel just came out this year, and that's mainly why I'm including, because we've added both of them to the collection this year. It is set in the summertime, so it's kind of off season, but it focuses around a coven of witches, and that's kind of why I wanted to include it in like the spooky stuff. And so that one is called These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. It focuses on Hannah, and she's a witch. It's genetic. She's grown up with it. She's always been a witch. It's actual real magic, not what you would think of witchcraft in today almost. She comes across a spell gone wrong almost, and she's having to figure out what happened. Is it a witch hunter? Is it a bad witch? Is it her ex trying to get back at her? And through all of the mystery of figuring out what is going on with her coven and what's this big threat, she's also having to deal with relationship issues where her ex-girlfriend wants to get back together, and there's also this new cute girl that she kind of wants to get to know a little bit more too. So there's a little bit of a romance story mixed in with all of the mystery and magic told throughout this tale. And so that is These Witches Don't Burn. This next one is back to the spooky and the horror. It's kind of more suspense than horror. And it is called The Companion by Katie Alender. It follows the story of Margot, whose family has just died. She has nowhere really else to go, and then this very rich family takes her in. The father was an acquaintance of her dad's, and so that's what they tell the social services. That's the reason they want to adopt her, as kind of like a repayment of that acquaintanceship. And it turns out that his motives and the family's motives, weren't all together pure. They really want her to be a companion to their daughter, who's very ill. You don't really know why she's ill at first. That's something that comes up a lot later. But as Margot gets more and more involved in this family, she realizes that there's something quite not right. Like, she's having missing memories, she's blacking out, like there's weird dreams, there's parts of the house that are just locked, but yet the daughter can still open up the door when no one's watching. And then there's this mystery of what happened to this ancestor of hers, of the family, and what exactly happened in the house. And so the story is very, very haunting. Like, you never know if it's supernatural or if it's just a real life person. And so you kind of go back and forth, and you get like this very creepy feel of like, is it haunted? Is it a serial killer? Is it something else? So if you're curious about that, so that is The Companion by Katie Alender. All right, and so this next one is another thriller. It is called A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. If you like true crime podcasts, you might like this one a lot. It follows the story of Pip, who wants to solve this 5-year mystery of what happened to Andy Bell. Andy was a girl who was murdered in her hometown. The cops and pretty much the entire community thinks her boyfriend did it, because right at I think like the next following week after she died, he committed suicide and had a suicide note to it, so content warning for that. And she doesn't believe he did it, and so she teams up with his younger brother, and she goes through old police reports, talks to all of the people in the community that were around at that time, and tries to figure out what exactly happened to her. And it's told through a series of regular narrative structure, and then Pip's transcripts of conversations she's had, all in the form of, this is going to be her capstone senior project. I will say it was originally published in the UK and set in the UK, and then the US publisher decided to change it to where it's set in Connecticut, so there are some behaviors and interactions with the teenagers that don't quite line up with what you would think American teenagers are like. But if that doesn't bother you at all, but you really like mysteries, check out The Good Girl's Guide to Murder. So now, these last two are not really fiction picks. They're 2 nonfiction books, and they're not really for the Halloween season. They're not scary stories or anything, but I felt that they apply very much with the election coming up and the political climate and learning more about the voting and fake news, actually. So the first one that I'm actually holding in my hand is True or False, a CIA Analyst's Guide to Spotting Fake News by Cindy L. Otis. This one I think is very important to have, especially if you want to be more media literate. It goes through the history of fake news, like all the way back to Egyptian times, and the splurge that came around, fake news that came out with Jack the Ripper. And then it goes through like different newspaper printings, different reports, different authors, all through the history of like how fake news has influenced the world, and who tells the stories and how it all works. And then the second half actually goes on to how to spot fake news in our current digital era. And then also like, how do you fight back from fake news? How do you educate yourself well enough to understand all the topics and all of the facts, and be the most informed you can be. So if you want to learn a little bit more about fake news and the history of fake news and how to fight it and how to recognize it, pick up True or False by Cindy Otis. And so this last one is kind of a graphic memoir almost. It's called Drawing the Vote, An Illustrated Guide to Voting in America by Tommy Jenkins and Katie Lacker. I say it's a graphic memoir mainly because it kind of focuses on the author's perspective of voting and his experiences with voter oppression and voter segregation. It opens up with like the first chapter. We're talking about the 2008 election, I believe, when President Obama was elected and his community's response to it, because he's from a small southern town. And then he takes that experience and he kind of explains why he wrote this book and what he wanted the reader to hopefully get out of it. And then he goes in through the history of voting from, like, at least voting in America, from the creation of the United States with the colonists, through segregation in the 50s and 60s, I believe, are the years, and women's suffragist movements, and all the way up to today. It goes through the importance of voting, what are your rights to vote, and how voting has shaped America, and like the creation of the two parties. So like, what does it mean to be a Democrat, what does it mean to be a Republican? It also has references in the index as well, so you can kind of look and see the source materials he used, what he referenced, kind of little more explanations if you wanted to go deeper into learning more about it. So if you wanted to find a little bit more about voting and the history of voting, but you don't want to read like a full heavy tome of it, but you'd rather like nice illustrations to kind of explain and break it down, try Drawing the Vote by Tommy Jenkins. So that is all of the books I have to recommend for you today. All of the links to our catalog, so you can place all these titles on hold, will be in the description below. These two right here, if you like the covers of them, that's Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas and Vampires Never Get Old, which is a short story anthology of vampires. All of the links to our catalog will be down below for everything that I talked about today. Also, the link to our teen advisory group sign up is also down below. We meet up every Tuesday at 3:30 on our Discord channel. You do need a teen library card, which is just a library card with your birth date on it, so I can make sure you're actually a teenager when you sign up and not an adult or a child. And so all of that will be down below. Leave a comment if there's any books you would recommend to fit into like the October description or the spooky season description that I kind of tried to get into. And if there's any themes or titles that you would like to see in future videos. The next one should be coming up on November 30th, right on this channel around the same time at 3:30. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.